Good morning. My name is Dr. James Bell III, and I would like to thank you for attending the Network for Social Work Management Forward Thinking Summit. I would also like to give a special shout out to everyone who's making this virtual event a success, from our sponsors to our hosts, the other speakers, and of course, you all, our guests. If you are looking for authentic community relationships from engagement to empowerment, you are in the right place. Because as you will learn today, there is a difference, and that difference matters as we consider our goals and our outcomes. I've been in social work now for nearly a decade, which before COVID-19 did not feel like a very long time. I've done child welfare, I've done research, I've been in government, I've been in nonprofits. I have checked all of the social work career boxes. But if I could have been anything else aside from a social worker, my choice is clear. I always wanted to be a teacher. I have always wanted to build positive relationships with students, helping to shape their future, molding their minds. And I really wanted to use my own creativity to make those mnemonics or acronyms or songs to help my students remember things. I remember the first time I ever heard PEMDAS as the order of operations. I wanted everyone to know that I had it figured out. And if I had it figured out, they could too. So why not share this gift? I even applied for Teach for America, and I was picking out cities based on their apartments. So I'm on apartments.com, like, ooh, Philadelphia, that sounds nice. And I had never even been to Philly. And though my life has taken a completely different path, I still find ways to volunteer, doing that thing that I love. Here you see me with a group of kids from my church after a weekend tutoring session. We came together to talk about math, and the church, knowing that I had a master's in social work, invited me to come help kids with math. But hey, who says social workers can't do math? If you see the extremely excited girl to the far side of the screen, that is my friend Offset. And Offset was so excited that she left her worksheet at the table during our photo op. But let me tell you a little bit more about my time with Offset doing math in the middle of the summer. I had seen Offset around church, sure, because of youth Sundays, but we don't know each other. And so I spend the first few minutes trying to get to know her, her family, what school she goes to. And let me tell you, she wasn't interested in any of my small talk, but she eventually obliges. I learn about her family. She tells me about her big brothers, how she loves science and Hello Kitty and singing in the choir. And so the group passes out the worksheets, and it's one of those typical multiplication sheets that you probably remember from elementary school. And we're looking at the problems on the worksheet, and she manages to do about half before I even have to get involved. And she gets stuck on this one particular problem. And of course, I ask her, what can she do to finish it? Especially knowing that she has encountered the same equation earlier on the page. She says the problem is too hard, and she doesn't want to do it. And so I want to remind you that I was invited to participate in this event. I brought to the work my master's, my bachelor's, in managing to scratch and claw my way through high school trigonometry. So as far as they were concerned, I was an expert. I tell her to look at the sheet and tell me if you see any problems that looks like this one. How can you do what you've done before to solve this math problem? She's not interested. When I press further, I pull back on my own experience with learning multiplication. I say, offset is just like addition. You keep adding the same number over and over again. And she looked at me with those bright brown eyes and she said, okay. And so now I'm trying something else. I did a similar problem in the margins, hoping she would see the patterns as she stared out the window. Nothing. So I took a novel approach. And instead of trying to teach her what I knew, I asked her to teach me what she knew. And she started singing a song. One's times table really is a breeze, chant along with style and ease. 1 times 1 equals 1, 2 times 1 equals 2. You get it. I'm a social worker, not a soprano. But she finished the worksheet and went back to staring outside. And so I'm giving her tons of praise, like, great work, Offset. You really knocked it out the park. And I take a look at the environment around me. I look at the kids, and I start to notice they are all in a similar state: bored, frustrated, over it. And so I go back to Offset because now we've established a little bit of a relationship and she trusts me just a little bit. And so I ask her, how do we make this more interesting? I need to know, how do we make math fun? And in her special way, she tells me, math is not fun. But she also rushes to the front of the room and she starts to sing her song again. One times table really is a breeze, chant along with style and ease. And what feels like a scene out of a movie, where the record scratches and everyone stops and stares, that's exactly what happened. The three adults that you see in this picture literally are staring with their jaws dropped as all these kids start singing this song. And so this was like Baby Shark on steroids. And I'm watching the kids as they get excited, even getting motivated, and they eventually go back to working on the math problems. And you guessed it, they all finished. So here we are in the middle of the summer in this classroom with kids just dying to get outside. And I take the older gentleman that you see in the back and I ask him, is it okay if we go outside now? And of course he says yes. And we're all able to get a little bit of sunshine since they have finished their work. Now you're probably wondering, how am I going to take this summer tutoring session and tie it back to authentic community relationships? But after this experience, I took away some very invaluable macro social worker lessons. First, working with community is listening to the community. And it all begins with the relationship. I mentioned I had no prior relationship with Offset, and had I not asked those questions early on, we might still be in that hot room talking about multiplication. Not only in having that strong relationship, we have to create mechanisms to hear directly from community on what their goals are, what their values are, what their traditions are. I could have continued trying to get Offset to do my abacus math, but she had a whole song ready to go. It tells us that things evolve. We often hear about this barrier for community engagement because we don't have the time. And I get it. Time is scarce and we don't have a lot of it. But for community is a time investment. What you invest in a time with a community, you get back in clarity. Asking the right questions offers clarity on your direction, the projects that you're working on, what your focus should be. Imagine you have been heading in the wrong directions for years simply because you never sought out input. I also learned that being an expert means you have some answers, but not necessarily the answer. Regardless of how many math courses I've taken, and even though I knew the answer on the worksheet, it was not my job to tell Offset how I solved the problem. It's critically important to understand how communities reach their own solutions. Their solutions are rooted in their experiences and their histories. When Offset started to sing a song, my poor use of those multiplication tables became even more apparent. So as we work with people in communities, we want to find the path that works best for them, regardless of how much we think or even know that we have the answer. You have to work with people, not do the work for people. Prepositions matter. When you are working with communities, there is no rubric. There are no fixed structures that are in place for community engagement initiatives. And honestly, I wish there was a checklist. But we as practitioners, we have a mindset that we can adopt for sharing resources and sharing power. When we approach community engagement projects, we should really be thinking about that idea of long-term community ownership, because that's the secret to sustainability. This is why if I were to give Offset the answers, it does absolutely nothing. That is doing work for people and it doesn't work for us. It doesn't lend itself to hear from the expertise of the community. We want to ensure that the population impacted by whatever the problem may be is involved in the decision-making process. And we must agree on that process, discuss and negotiate our values, and really the purpose of this engagement. What role do we play as practitioners? And what role does the community want? This is how we work with people. And the last lesson is understand what motivates your people and recognize their assets. Listening to Offset, it became clear that going outside was attractive. I mean, come on, it's summertime, they're in tie-dye t-shirts. You naturally want to go outside. Yes, Every community is different, but all people have real lives, stories, and dreams. Authentic community relationships are rooted in people with relationships and a shared identity. Identify what those common goals are. What do they want to see as part of their community? We wanted to achieve long-term outcomes because at some point, funding dries up, leadership changes, the mission may shift, but community will always be there. So we should spend our time building that trust, learning what motivations are, and shifting our work to empower our communities, not just to engage them. Speaking of power, communities have it. Communities have the ability to influence others. Offset's voice, the fact that I knew that she loved singing, that was an asset and it motivated others. When we consider power with and working with, we can mobilize resources and assets. And recognizing community assets is the precursor to sharing power. There's always power, and we recognize the assets. When we do that, we see the power. Authentic community relationships are built on respect, mutual support, and collaborative decision-making. Authenticity can build bridges within groups and across differences. So how are we using our influence to transform practice and policies? How are we making sure that our communities get to go outside? So even if I never become a teacher, I still want you all to remember a song. And I'll take you back to the days of Schoolhouse Rock. You may remember Conjunction Junction, What's Your Function? And as you go out to do your work, engaging and empowering communities, I want to remix things just a little bit for you as you go forward. I want you to think preposition, preposition, what's your mission? Thank you.